Hello, and welcome to my Celebration 2 Part 1. My name is Anna Catherine Brown, and today I will be showing you my creative representation for Celebration 2 Part 1, which covers chapters 4 through 7 in the text. Today I will be specifically focusing on the material from chapters 4 through 6. So I decided to create a photo of a garden whose inhabitants, both plants and animals, metaphorically demonstrate the concepts we have learned about. When drawing my image, I envisioned the gardener to be a symbolic teacher. The garden is his classroom, and the inhabitants are his students. As you can see, his students are diverse in shape and experience. We have a sunflower, an earthworm, a bee with its beehive, a spider, and a bird over here as well, and the soil itself. Would a gardener measure these different inhabitants the exact same way? Of course not. A sunflower demonstrates its growth by increasing in its height and budding open, but bees show their growth by collecting pollen and nectar for their entire colony and developing their beehive. Spiders demonstrate success through the beautiful creation of their spider webs, which are done with detail and precision. If the gardener were to measure the success of all his inhabitants simply by how long they survived, this would be an unreliable measure of individual growth. This equates to the question of inauthentic versus authentic assessment in classrooms. While an inauthentic assessment or a high-stakes assessment is objective and measures current level of attainment, for example, the number of years that these different creatures are living, an authentic assessment evaluates understanding of course concept and growth over time. On average, earthworms live between 1.25 and 2.6 years, while bumblebees only live for 6 to 7 weeks on average. Measuring these insects' success based off of the number of years that they live would not be an accurate measurement of their success and their work. Authentic assessments offer qualitative judgments about students' strength and instructional needs in their content subjects. So to authentically assess his garden, the gardener might look at the improvement of the soil, which the earthworms help to fertilize. For the bees, he might look at the development of their hive. And for the spider, he might consider that this creature demonstrates its strength artistically and creatively through the creation of a precise and beautiful web. And for every creature, he understands that they all have their own strength and their own unique intelligence to be considered when authentically assessing them. So what is a teacher or a gardener's role in authentic assessment? To know his students, to know his garden inhabitants, to observe his students and to understand their strengths, weaknesses, desires, and needs, to meet the special needs and requirements of all of the students in order to promote success. For example, sunflowers grow best when they are placed in the direct sunlight or have sun exposure. As you can see in this photo, our gardener has planted our sunflower so that it is in the path of sunlight, which is a resource that's necessary for it to flourish and to show its success and growth. Similarly, a teacher might recognize that a student does best with writing assessments in class when they have a quiet space with no distractions. So they might make that accommodation for that special requirement for that student in order for them to show their very best potential with their work in an authentic assessment. To further this thought, our garden is also a wonderful metaphor for self-efficacy. Self-efficacy in education refers to the I can belief that leads to a sense of competence, self-competence, or, according to Bandura, people's judgment of their abilities to organize and execute courses of action required to attain designated types of performance. So self-efficacy relates to literacy and that it is important to the development of students' perceptions of themselves as capable readers. It's also linked with motivation for reading. If students believe that they are capable of something, they'll be more motivated to do it. So in our garden, each of our students or inhabitants has something that they're striving for, something that is measurable in terms of their success. The gardener has been thoughtful as to improve the self-efficacy of its inhabitants by positioning them in a place for self-realization and for success. For example, he places the sunflower in the path of light in order for it to feel more capable in its ability to grow. By keeping the beehive near the flowers, the gardener positions the bees where they can find nectar and have confidence in their ability to provide for their colony. This moves us into my next metaphorical component of this drawing. By strategically placing the beehives near the flowers, the gardener is putting into practice the educational concept of considerations for small groups. What things might teachers consider when designating small groups? One important component of group composition is group composition, the combination of interest, backgrounds, attitudes, personality. All of these things help create the dynamic of a group. None of the inhabitants in our garden can survive on their own. They rely on the strengths of each other. For example, both the bees and the bird rely on the nectar from the flower, just like the flower relies on the sunlight in order to grow. The soil needs the earthworm's abilities to help fertilize it and to move more air and water into the soil and to break down organic material in order for the soil to be healthy. And the spider, while often perceived as an unwanted insect, actually protects this entire garden by keeping away harmful bugs that might infect the other flowers or animals. The spider is like a student who keeps away negative behavior or negative attitudes and protects the rest of the students from the danger of that. So the gardener or the teacher, through the observation of his students, would come to recognize these strengths and create small groups according to who complements who. Group roles in education allow for a division of labor that helps members to produce work efficiently and cooperatively. To look at the garden as an example, we could give the sunflower the role of the leader. The bumblebees, because they move about the garden quite a bit as they transfer pollen around, could be the readers because they reach all areas of the garden and could spread the message to everyone involved. The spider could be the perfect writer record keeper because it has skills and abilities to work quickly and accurately. It is very detail oriented and precise in the creation of its web. Our earthworm could be the checker because it has the perspective from the soil, the literal groundwork for our entire garden. It can affirm that the soil is still in good shape and that it's promoting a flourishing gardening, or it might see that the soil needs improvement and it can help increase that air and water flow necessary. And our bird, which has a beautiful singing voice and has a true gift in that area, could be the encourager, much like the student who has the ability to brighten everyone's days and make everybody feel welcome with his or her compassion. One final educational concept to consider in our garden is the idea of where these students or our inhabitants come from, their backgrounds, and what this brings to learning. In order to motivate and to engage students in reading and learning, teachers can use pre-reading activities like story impressions, problematic perspectives, predictions in order to arouse curiosity and to spark some connections with these students and their backgrounds to the text. So in our garden, it is evident that our inhabitants come from many different backgrounds. The sunflower's roots demonstrate that it's a symbol, how every inhabitant grows from its own seeds, its own origins, its own eggs, etc. One way to spark interest in students would be to create story impressions of a text by providing them with a list of terms, key terms from the text, and before reading the text, allowing them to come up with a story of their own. And for example, the terms soil and food could be used. Now, while soil and food mean one thing to the earthworm, they mean something very different to the bees. The bees spend their time above the soil, and food to them means the pollen from the flowers. But the worms spend their time within the soil, and food to them is dead leaves and dead grass. So as you can see, these different creatures bring very different perspectives to the same topic. They are much like students who have their own background knowledge and their own roots and seeds to consider in a classroom. These different perspectives help foster an environment for discussion that promotes diversity, contradiction, challenges, and group cooperation. These perspectives, when celebrated and recognized, can help create a classroom that gives students the chance to grow individually and to learn and listen to each other. As future teachers, we should strive to be like the gardener, who sees his inhabitants as individual creations that all have so much potential and strength and ability to work and help each other grow. And that is all for my celebration too. Thank you very much for listening, and yes, thank you.